Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Saints all of a sudden got pretty active, as many of you were bemoaning the fact that the Saints hadn't done much and had been pretty passive in free agency after signing Marcus May and watching Teron Armstead walk out the door and Marcus Williams, although I think we understand why, financial considerations there, just what value you put on a player. Yes, they went hard after Deshaun Watson, and it didn't work out that way. They re-signed Jameis Winston, but after that, it had been quiet. People have been wondering why the Saints haven't signed receivers or a left tackle or maybe more help at safety, as we've all sort of wanted, that Tyrann Mathieu dream to become a reality. And in about a 24-hour period, the Saints got really, really active. They consummated the trade we discussed at length yesterday with the Eagles that now have the Saints with 3 picks in the top 50 in this year's draft, including 2 first-round picks, number 16 and number 19. Tyrann Mathieu was at the Saints facility earlier today on a Tuesday. And the Saints have gotten a bit more active. So Blake Bortles has been released by the New Orleans Saints. So Bortles, you might remember, late in the season last year, was signed as a backup to be sort of a veteran presence for Ian Book when Book was starting for the Saints against Miami. COVID kind of ravaged the roster, and so they had Ian Book and no other quarterbacks, and so they signed Bortles to be the backup. Well, Bortles was under contract on a veteran minimum salary this year for 2022, and when the Saints went and signed Andy Dalton to a nice backup deal, $3 million, could be valued at $6 million. It basically meant Bortles had no shot of being a backup quarterback with the Saints because Andy Dalton's going to fill that role. So he asked for his release, and the Saints have granted him his release. So Blake Bortles no longer in New Orleans. He'll look for a landing spot where he could potentially be the number 2 to back up a starter. Denver would make sense. Their first-year head coach, Nathaniel Hackett, worked with Bortles in Jacksonville where he was the OC. So there's a tie there. Although we said the same thing as Hackett worked in Green Bay and thought maybe that might be a very obvious tie for Aaron Rodgers to end up in Denver. It didn't work out that way. But so Blake Bortles, he'll move on. That certainly clears the way for Andy Dalton solely as the backup with the Saints. Ian Book's going to be interesting this year to see what happens there, what his future is with this organization, if he has a future with this organization. Maybe of greater consequence, though, than releasing Blake Bortles, because that's something I guess we all anticipated was going to happen anyway at some point, that you aren't going to carry 4 quarterbacks this year, is the Saints signing Taco Charlton. So, quick catch-up. You probably at least have heard the name. Guy's name's Taco. I mean, he played at a very prominent school. He played at Michigan. He was a big, long defensive end at Michigan, so he had the catchy name, was a good player at Michigan, became a first-round draft pick. He was taken 28 overall by Dallas back in the 2017 draft. So 2017 was the giant draft for the Saints where obviously they drafted Lattimore and Ramczyk in round 1, and they got Marcus Williams in round 2, and Kamara and Anzalone and Hendrickson. I mean, it was that great draft. Charlton was the 28th pick of that draft. Struggled in Dallas, never really emerged. And then has bounced around after starting his career with the Cowboys and has spent each of the last 3 years with a different team. The Dolphins in 2019, the Chiefs in 2020, then last year with the Steelers. So now this will be Taco Charlton's 4th different team in as many seasons. So he was released in after 2 seasons in Dallas. In the beginning of his 3rd season in 2019, he was released and then landed with the Dolphins. So really only 2 full seasons with the team that took him in round 1. It ain't work out if a team used a first-round draft pick on you and after 2 years, they're cutting bait. Like, they didn't even give you enough rope to try to make it work. But he's a guy that's played a good bit of football. He's played in 55 career games, played in all 16 games as a rookie. then 11 games with Dallas in 2018, 10 games with Miami in 2019, 7 games with Kansas City in 2020, and then last year played in 11 games with Pittsburgh, managed just a half a sack, 18 tackles. Not a great year for Taco Charlton last year in Pittsburgh. And so now it's why he's on his 4th team in as many years. I don't want to oversell this. I don't want... I'll give you an example of when something like this worked really well. When the Saints signed Nick Fairley, he was a first-round draft pick, was so dominant at Auburn. But he went to Detroit, and he was alongside Ndamukong Suh, and he kind of got a little overshadowed, and he had some injury issues, and he went to the Rams, and then you're right there on that line with Michael Brockers and Aaron Donald, and he got lost in the shuffle. And he needed an opportunity for someone to say, hey, the thing you do really well is you blow up plays from the interior. Go do that. Don't worry about winning the job. Just go be that guy. And the Saints gave him that opportunity, and Nick Fairley ended up being really good for the Saints. Now, his career unfortunately ended, we all know, because he had the heart condition, which prematurely ended his playing career. But that's one of those instances where a guy that the league had kind of given up on found it because he went to the right place and knew how to use him. I don't know if that's what's going to happen here with Taco Charlton, but I'm hopeful that it could, because sometimes it takes that journeyman finding the right spot where he's the piece that fits perfectly into that specific puzzle. Great players make teams adapt to them and their skill set, no matter what that team does. Like Von Miller in Denver, Von Miller with the Rams, what Von Miller is going to be in Buffalo. Like, Von Miller is a great player, has been his entire career, and no matter where he goes, it's going to work because he's a great player, and that defense is going to adapt to him because he's great. Taco Charlton isn't that. He hasn't worked out. But maybe in the right spot for a guy that's 6'6", 270 and has a certain skill set, maybe as a rotational piece can bring value. The Saints know Cam Jordan is at one defensive end. And when Marcus Davenport is healthy, he's been a dominant guy on the other side. The problem is keeping him healthy. Now, we all hope that he stays healthy this year. It'd be awesome if he did. But the other thing that we have seen Dennis Allen and Ryan Nielsen do is use odd fronts to get your best guys on the field. And sometimes that means taking a defensive end and sliding him in to play tackle so you get 3 or 4 edge rushers on the field or pass rushers all on the field at once. That was one of the reasons I liked the Peyton Turner draft pick last year. Now, Peyton Turner was injured, and we'll see, but he's a guy that could play end. I mean, Peyton Turner, after he was drafted, came on the show and said as much. He can play 3 technique. He can slide inside and play tackle. He's versatile enough to do both. So there could be scenarios where you have Cam Jordan at end, you have Davenport and Turner on the interior, and then you could have Tano Passanio or Taco Charlton or Carl Granderson on the edge. Guys that are more versatile. Look, Granderson's a guy who the last 2 years has really been a productive football player. He started to come into his own. And Granderson was a much better run defender last year. He really started to develop as a run defender in 2021. So you take a guy like Taco Charlton, who's 6'6", 270, maybe it's something as simple as saying, do what Tano Passanio does really well, which is get your hands in the air and block passes. Intercept or interfere in passing lanes, interrupt passing lanes. You're 6'6", 270. Get your hands up. Maybe that can be Taco Charlton's role as a rotational player on the team. Now, he's got to make the team. Don't misunderstand me. But when you look at a guy that is physically gifted enough to be a first-round pick, there's something there that if you can tap into the right skill set in the right scheme, you can find value. I'm not going to oversell this and tell you I think he's a 50-tackle, double-digit sack guy, because I don't think that's a reality. He is what he is as an NFL player right now. He's a journeyman. He's a rotational player. But you look for value, which the Saints have managed to find over the years in guys like this. They found it with Tano Passanio last year, but he just had an injury issue. I mean, that was a recurring theme last year with the entire Saints roster. I like this. I like to see if this can be another guy that you work in on a defensive line that didn't have great depth a year ago and now you have a veteran player who's got some physical ability to see if you can maybe maximize that in this defense this year. So, Taco Charlton, got to earn a roster spot, but I think he's at least an interesting prospect on this Saints team as they head into 2022, into the offseason workouts, and then into training camp to see if he's a guy that can maybe win a roster spot and find a sort of rebirth of sorts of his NFL career. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.